Trudy, do we have any ice?
You son of a bitch.
Anyway, sometime in the summer of 48. No, 1932. No, 1939.
But when I say I want the moon, I expect the moon.
Because he was caught with chewing gum on his pubis.
World handed to us on a plate, and then you swing in on a chandelier, drop your pants, and crap on it.
You're a very, very gifted storyteller.
I killed my CO.
You have lost your mind!
Where the hell are you supposed to be?
Because Scouts honor.
This is my business. I mean business!
Hello and welcome to Blow and Smoke, the officially unofficial Mad Men podcast, where we dive into each and every episode of one of the very greatest pieces of televisual storytelling ever. So sit back, relax, and smoke them if you got them, because this right here is the cure for the common podcast. We're your co-hosts, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
I'm Levi.
And here we are. I would say for episode 1, obviously episode 1 was our intro episode, but officially now, episode 1 of Mad Men, the pilot, a.k.a. Smoke, gets in your eye. So, in your
with
eyes. Oh, as I say, eyes.
Crazy Eyes Killer.
Crazy
of
Eyes Killer.
This show. No, I guess we should say that, it's a random thing. Like, you ever notice how some TV shows, they count the pilot as separate from episode 1?
Yes. I wonder if this one, I think this one might have been retroactively named Smoke Gets in Your Eye. Or maybe it was like, obviously it was shot as a pilot, but then like when it actually came to air, along with the rest of season 1 after that, it then got called Smoke Gets in Your Eye.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
right.
It's the pilot of the show.
Yeah, but you know how like they say, like pilot, and then episode 1, it's like, yeah. Which I know one of the big things that did that was Twin Peaks, which that's... I love that show, but it's weird as hell anyway, so it's just like...
Well, also, it was put out even on VHS and home video.
Right.
It was almost its own little movie, those first 2 episodes. So.
Anyway, I guess, I was thinking, before we actually even talk about, this episode, I guess we should talk about season 1 in general, right? Just a little bit, and we can kind of do that.
So it takes place, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, I think loosely in front of March 1960. This is when this show begins, all the way through the November and the election of 1960. Obviously, I think for people who didn't watch the show, what it looks like and how it got disseminated through popular culture in the late 2000s, as this was a new thing, is the stereotype of the show. Oh, it's guys in suits smoking cigarettes and being misogynist. It's like that was the short order stereotype that the season 1 kind of established, because obviously ostensibly the world of season 1 is, as was 1960, ostensibly the 50s. You know what I mean? It's still very much, it's not the 60s we're going to come to know and remember, as is true of the 60s in general, but also the show. It is very strange, though, like, as if you're watching this for the first time, it's not going to have this effect. But as someone who's watched the show multiple times, you can't help but think of season 1 as, the quote-unquote good old days, as far as, like, that's how Don looked, and that's how Harry Crane looked, and that's what... remember when Peggy was like this? And, it's strange. It mirrors real life in that way, as far as you move forward in time and you go through these new and different phases. To go back and rewatch season 1 is like, those days, the good old days, when it was just Sterling Cooper, because even the agency itself is going to go through lots of different changes, right? Much less, obviously, the characters themselves.
Yeah, because this is as much about good old days for them as it is about, just looking like the 50s, being more of that stereotypical thing. And in that way, just in general about season 1, it probably is my least favorite season, just based on the fact that it's beginning things and opening up the world of itself. And I don't want to act like it's not great, but it's a less complicated version. I mean, that's common in pretty much every first season of TV.
Yeah,
like
every first season TV has a lot of groundwork to lay. I think it's even harder for period shows because they have to not only introduce you to the time period and the rhythms of the period, they're also doing the thing any other show is going to do, which is establish its characters and establish its world. So I would agree this is probably among my lesser favorite of the seasons. But I mean, there's still some very standout, important episodes
of any TV show. I mean, this and The Sopranos, probably, maybe The Wire.
Where would you rank this as far as like pilots or first episodes? When you think about some of the other shows, I think one of the
better. I mean, of course, I think probably the best is Twin Peaks, maybe, or The Sopranos. I think is a really great one. This one's fine. I mean, obviously, it's weird. I don't want to be so negative about like my favorite show, obviously, but I don't know. Just the more that I've watched this show as it's gone on, the first season, especially the first kind of like 4 episodes of this first season, are a little more like covering topics or ideas almost.
I'd say that's especially true of like episodes 2, 3, and 4-ish.
Yeah. Once
it gets past some of that, it starts to settle into itself.
Well, I think even the first one is about smoking. The second one's about like women. The third one is kind of more about like I don't know, like, well, I remember that one has the birthday party in it, right? Is that one?
Might have been.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And so that one's kind of like about hang on, I'm looking at the episodes here. Is more about like just what it was like to live back then, you know, like that kind of cultural ideas. New Amsterdam is kind of about some of the Jewishness stuff a little bit, but that's the one where it's like, he might be fired. Pete might be fired, and then 5G is kind of like, okay,
that's going to start to tap in more to the Don Draper backstory.
And then Babylon, that's still a lot about the Jewish aspects and stuff, but then kind of then on, it's a lot more about, okay, this actual storytelling going on. Not that there's not storytelling here, but especially in this first episode, there's like a classic moment of Don like laying with his eyes closed inside. There's bombs going off, and it's like he has a past, and it's like, you know, it's very piloty.
I would say though, like between the pilot, and I'm not going to cover everything here, but like I'm going to cover some big things in season 1. The pilot, 5G, the Nixon versus Kennedy episode, and then the wheel. Not only the carousel pitch, but then also the way the episode ends are all like very iconic pieces of the show that's still found in season 1. And also like Peggy is obviously kind of the character that most develops over the course of the whole show, I would say.
Yeah.
Other than maybe like Sally, but that's literally her transformation as a child and into more of a young woman. But like Peggy's character changes the most, like, you know, in season 1. So all of those elements are things that like lay the foundation for future greatness with the show.
And it's also, the show is showing us what it is too, and saying this is what this show will be, is a version of that. And so I don't want to be too down on it from the get-go, but and I'm sure I'll appreciate it even more as we watch it, but it's also the season I watch quite a bit of the most, because I kind of false started this show a lot of times, and so I'm kind of just like, okay,
you want to get
like,
to season 2
I want to get
already.
to the other stuff, so it's like the first episode of Band of Brothers. It's like, okay, and this is nice.
I'll go ahead and put out this prediction now. I'll be curious to see how this changes as we go through the whole show. I feel like every season got better, 1 through 4. Like every season's better than the last one was. 5, once you get to 5, I think season 4 and 5-ish are kind of the best seasons. And like, I won't say the show plateaus, but I mean, it literally is, you know, because there's a run of like middle of season 4 are literally home run, like greatest of the show, like potential level episodes. That to me is kind of
that's like just so we say, Waldorf Stories, The Suitcase, Summer Man, all right there is like premier. Even the Chrysanthemum and the Sword before that, and the Beautiful Girls after that. A lot of those are like
that
really
premiere is
great
really
stuff.
great too. For 4.
Yeah.
So Like,
and that Christmas episode's good too.
as being such a great show, there's a point where it can only be so great,
right?
And that's just it. Just reaches its ceiling, I think, after a point. Not to take away from the second half of the show, because there's obviously still, also too, like Mad Men's storytelling is so distinct within television that I know we didn't, but like I feel like critics and certainly the Emmys, which we can talk about that too over the course of the show, took it for granted. And I remember, like, during seasons 5 and 6, when I was, like, watching it as it aired, there was a certain malaise where you'd see, like, New Yorker articles being written, like, is Mad Men okay? Is Mad Men still the same? And it's just a show that, by its very nature, is sometimes about, specifically with Don Draper, characters repeating their mistakes.
Right.
And so I think sometimes people... And I mean, I'm not saying the show's above criticism, because there's things to criticize, even though I love it and dearly. But I think some people were like not quite understanding that, and the frustration with the narrative itself being about a character who is repeating their mistakes and not being able to move past them. And sometimes critics naturally, and I think maybe in some cases is justified, even though not always, criticize the show on those grounds about a character repeating themselves because they feel as though the show's repeating itself. Yeah. But I stand by the fact that, was specifically with Don and women over the course of the show never really does repeat itself. It's always doing something a little new and different.
Yeah.
The final half season being something that was going back even to the beginning of the show. People were like, really? Don is one last time having this affair with this woman? And but we've seen how...
But then she's the female Don Draper. Right. And he's like, wait, what? Right. That's what that feels like, to just be left behind? And then that sends him on this whole soul searching, which ends the show.
Real quick, I want to mention some other first episodes that I think are among the best. And these are... Lost has a reputation for being almost its own film level, high quality, I think, the Lost pilot. Yeah. Also, the West Wing pilot is really great. I think that has one of the greatest character introductions I've seen in film or TV, period. Mm-hmm. Have you seen the West Wing first episode? Yeah. Do you remember, like, so Michael...
The whole time, Martin Sheen's
not in it.
He's at the end, yeah.
And then, like, it's specifically, like, members of his administration are arguing with these religious fundamentalists about something Josh Lyman had said on TV, insulting them and kind of the Christian right. And one of those people gets wrong the first commandment, and Toby's like, "That's not the first commandment." And then one of the guys, "All right, well, what is the first commandment?" And then all of a sudden, you hear Martin Sheen's voice saying, "I'm the Lord your God," like, and he walks. It's just like such a, and then him in that scene is such a awesome character introduction that I'll just always remember that. Obviously, we'll talk about it when we go through it. Don Draper's character introduction in this is counterpointed to his outro in the very last episode. Literally, I mean, aesthetically is like the opposite in terms of, like, you know, it's gonna be like behind him coming in, not totally dissimilar from what the famous, you know, shadow of him is in the opening credits.
Right.
And it's kind of like, you know, that's very close to how he's introduced in the show, and then in the, you know, literally it's the counterpointed as the show ends in season 7.
Yeah.
I think the most endearing aspect of this whole season, and particularly this episode, is the introduction of Don Draper as an archetypal figure, and how he relates to the other Prestige era protagonists.
Yeah.
Very distinct, very different, while also being, it's a version of masculinity. But I mean, all these big shows, from The Sopranos to this, Breaking Bad, again, all the big shows of the Prestige era, you know, their main characters as representations of the show. I think that is one of the best things about this pilot and this first season, is the introduction of Don Draper and how his backstory is, and not even totally given in season 1, because you get a lot of stuff in season 2 that also sheds light into him, and throughout also. But especially season 1, how that's slowly drawn out. You know, he's compared to Batman in this first episode by Harry Crane.
Yeah.
Obviously, is this mysterious figure that.
Well, it fits his whole kind of he dropped out of the sky kind of idea of, like, he's a genius and we don't really know why, and he doesn't really want to talk to anybody or fraternize with any of these people. I mean, you'll see that very quickly that even Roger, he feels almost uncomfortable fraternizing with, and we later realize why he even does that is because, well, he fooled him into bringing him into the company. So
that doesn't come until season 4.
Right,
yeah.
so he kind of feels, and he does like him more or less. But
well, I've heard Matthew Weiner talk about, too, that he did not originally know that Don and Roger would be friends, and that evolves over the course of literally the first, 2-ish seasons, almost 3-ish seasons, because there is, early on a certain kind of camaraderie where they look at these idiot kids as their employees, but there are these resentments between them. But it's especially when they both break away in season 3 going into season 4 to do their own agency, where that becomes more solidified. Because in the first few seasons there actually is a little bit of a tension that is eventually put to bed. But
I mean, I want no more contact with Roger Sterling. Moment, it's like literally, have you looked at the calendar lately? But
I love to Roger, and we'll make mention. Well, we might actually need to do a count of this over the course of the show. Yeah. How many times he makes reference to his name being outside, his name being on the sign, his name being in the agency.
Yeah. How many times in this opening season specifically that Roger is always like, "Here's a little pearl of wisdom. We drank because it's good, or we did this, or smoking is this, or business is all about, or his whole Sterling's Gold idea of I'm gonna say something especially this season. There's a lot of Roger is the wise sage, because Burt Cooper can't even be that because he's so daggum weird. His stuff's like riddles, So
and especially early on, Burt seems he's always mysterious, but some of the scenes between him and Roger feel like they're in a slightly other world than the world of this fraternizing that's going on between these younger men in the office. Obviously, we got to talk about Peggy. Peggy is our entry into this world. She's literally new at Sterling Cooper. This is her first day is going to be depicted in this. Starts off as Don's secretary. There's a little bit in season 1 about, will Don romance her or have an affair with her? That's kind of quickly shut down. I think later on Peggy almost takes that a little bit as an insult, because there's going to be a whole litany of Don's secretaries that come in and out that are quote-unquote perhaps more conventionally attractive than Peggy. But, and this is not immediately clear until later in season 1, but honestly in seasons 2 and 3, as Peggy starts to flourish as a copywriter, that Don actually genuinely respects her and sees her as above. And then, again, much later, her whole relationship with Ted Shaw is the what if her and Don had a relationship, and Don seems almost disappointed in her and doing that, even though who is he to judge anybody for having an affair, because he's going to have so many. But again, what do you think of Peggy in season 1 in this first episode?
I think that's the overall the most crucial and the best thing about season 1 is her character development. Obviously,
which Freddie Rumsen plays a big role in.
That's true, and that's an interesting relationship over time. Too, and he's a random character I sometimes forget about, honestly, that's in this show quite a bit, but
who dips out for a while and comes back in towards the end.
Kind of like this one guy that we're watching the menu here, that we keep seeing that
it's like a freelance
copywriter
that
is still even in season 3 era of it, and comes in and out all the time. But with Peggy, I mean, it ends up, of course, there's a whole tie between her and Pete, and that's this whole thing, and that's kind of a representation in its own way of the youth of the show, and they're actual capable youths in different ways, with his being always more fraught than hers, obviously, but somebody who still can do their job, with relative ease, and I would never call him professional, relatively. Pete Campbell is professional, but he's good at what he does anyway, in a different way. There's
that one telling scene in season 5 or 6 with where he's talking to Don's, who he marries in this show later on, Megan's father.
Yeah.
and who's this like
Oh, the French
Canadian
guy,
French Canadian
Yeah.
intellectual type, and he's like, "What do you do?" And he's like, "Well, what do you do?" And he's like, he there's this really great scene where he coaxes him into telling him all about himself, and he flatters him, and blah 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 blah. And then Pete ends the scene by saying, "And that is exactly what I do." And then he realizes what just happened, and
Right.
he kind of laughs, and yeah, and again, that's what's so strange about this show is like we know where Peggy and Pete are going when we rewatch this show, and so it's weird. It's like watching Muppet Babies or something. It's like, oh, where they were season 1, you know.
Right.
I can't remember if it's this episode or episode 2. You know, Pete is recently married when the show begins. Marries Trudy. There's like a background photo of her that is not
it's in this one. I think.
that is not the actress.
Or it's not
Allison
literally
Brie,
shown
or
it. Yeah, it's not her.
that
That's like
is-
the only thing in this whole
Which
show.
that
that's
happens
different.
with pilots, like
Because that even happened
you know.
with The Sopranos. Was a different store name originally. It wasn't Satriali's. It was something else in the first episode, and then they changed it after the pilot.
Yeah.
But yeah, this feels like it is still more organically part of the show, in ways that some pilots do not. But yeah, I mean,
Because again,
obviously-
pilots are usually like a proof of concept. Like this is what
Yeah.
it's going to be like, and I think the confidence that this came with already coming after, like as again, a lot of this was tied to The Sopranos had just ended. Oh, one of the big Sopranos writers has his own show now, and this will probably come up throughout. I know this whole endeavor originally started off as a screenplay from Matthew Weiner called The Horseshoe, I believe it was called.
Yeah.
That is where a lot of Don's backstory is. It's basically kind of the story of Don Draper in that original script, and where he come from, how his life changed and evolved, and obviously, like I think, especially in this first season, kind of goes through a lot of that, even though there's more that comes later. And then, like that was the jumping off point for. And one of the things that got him the job on The Sopranos.
Yeah, because I'm
is
reading
that
here that
screenplay.
he showed him the pilot episode, which was a version of that by that point. That he
David Chase, you
basically,
referred to,
David Chase read that and was like, "Yeah, we will take you obviously for writing on The Sopranos," and then he obviously kind of just like put that on the back burner for a long time until this was made. But they said he was working on some show called Becker. At the time.
that was a Ted Danson sitcom.
Yeah. But yeah, that was what he was actually working on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then got the job on The Sopranos. But yeah, so all that's to say that season 1 is good and I like it fine enough, and it'll start to develop as it goes on. I'll start to be more into it, I think, as it continues. But to speak a little bit though about the episode itself, just a little bit because we've talked.
Yeah,
about
well,
it a lot.
I can read it real quick here for this episode guide. This little episode guide that came with the Blu-ray. Smoke Gets in Your Eye, written, of course, by Matthew Weiner, directed by Alan Taylor. It's always important when you acknowledge who the director of the pilot of a show is because they essentially help establish the tone. Alan Taylor directed a lot of The Sopranos. He actually also has directed a few movies here and there. I think he directed Thor, some of the Thor... not Love and Thunder, the second Thor movie, Dark World.
Okay.
And he's done some other. He might have done. Check on this for me. He might have done the Many Saints of Newark also. The spin-off.
Yes, he did.
Of The
But yeah, that's
Sopranos
normally
prequel.
what I think of is him. Obviously, he directed some of Game of Thrones. But
He's
I
one of the
normally think
premier
of
TV directors.
The Sopranos, but yeah, he did direct that and Terminator Genesis.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. He also did direct that episode Beyond the Wall, where that was the one where it was like a big battle or something. Yeah, that was that one where it was at the big battle in season 6 of Game of Thrones, that real long Winterfell battle. So that's notable because that was a good episode.
Okay, so set in 1960 New York City in an unexpected new world, the high-powered and glamorous golden age of advertising, where everyone is selling something and nothing is ever what you expect it to be. The drama unfolds around Don Draper, John Hamm, the biggest ad man in the business, as he makes the plays in the boardroom and the bedroom, the struggles to stay a step ahead of the rapidly changing times, and the young executives nipping at his heels.
So ridiculous, but okay.
Again,
very
establishing
loud,
that this show is also obviously about advertising, not organized crime or like this magical kingdom, or it's very much. And again, I think this in 2007, this sort of thing had sort of fallen by the wayside. But there's a lot of actually movies set in the 50s and 60s that are about, as we talked about last time, the fast, exciting world of advertising, and so. I think the show that most resembles this around this time, and again it's different, but would be The West Wing in terms of it being this institution where it's like set in a like fast moving environment where it's men and women entering and talking in and leaving rooms. Again, that's like that kind of plot. It doesn't have the walk and talk camera that The West Wing had, but it did get some comparisons to Aaron Sorkin, which I think Matthew Weiner's taken more of an insult than anything else. Yeah. Because, and I say that as a fan of with caveats of Aaron Sorkin, because this doesn't. I mean, maybe the first episode has some like flashy Don lines here or there, but I mean it's going for a more naturalistic sound. It's not going for that like
this episode
Sorkin preachiness.
The lesser one of the season for that. I think of like there are some moments that are very like okay, and they'll be throughout season 1, but less as it goes along, and especially season 2 onward, very little of that.
Yeah,
And that, of course, just by nature of, getting to know the people, you have to establish some sort of,
rhythm
of itself. And that's what this does well enough. Main things of this episode, I guess. Lucky Strike is the main client, and as obviously you go throughout the show, that continues to be a thing, really, until season 4.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's about smoking. There's a lot of comedy about smoking in this as well, about, like, that part where they're like, yeah, whatever about smoking, and they're all coughing. There's that moment where they're all coughing and hacking and going on. And in its own way, that is kind of a distillation of the whole show in one episode, is saying how can we sell people on something that they don't really need, and how do we do that, and how do we make this seem like a different product than everything that's just tobacco, which is all the same.
Yeah.
Anyway. And are all made in the same place, basically, but are different companies. And so that's the main kind of focus of it. Obviously, it's all over one day. And what I do really like about this episode, too, is that it really teases out, is Don married? Where does he live? Like, all these questions about him that aren't answered until the end, ultimately.
Yeah, because Betty is really more formally introduced in the next episode. Right. Obviously, we haven't said her name once at all really here, but she's and as you said, the next episode is kind of the women episode, but because Betty's formally comes in at the very end of this one, but it's really in the second episode where you actually start to see what their home life is, and like their kids, and we'll count the Bobbies again as we go through the show.
This one is the least developed whatsoever. Like the most memorable this Bobby ever is to anybody is the fact that he's in the carousel pitch in one of the pictures, and it's like that's the only thing that's memorable about that character.
Well, I think even
that actor,
I might be wrong about this. I think even the pilot Bobby is different than the Bobby that was.
So there's 5 of them, I think.
We'll count it as we go throughout, but
there's like at least 4 if that's the case, because there is there'd have to be 5, because there's this one in this season in general, season 1 Bobby, then pilot Bobby, that's 2. Then season 2 sticks tongue, I didn't do it, Bobby. Then I think there's one in the middle there, and then the final Bobby.
The final Bobby.
I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
It was like 5.
Yeah, I think we'll see.
Anyway, and I get that, with a kid getting older, you got to change now.
Well, the show
Sally,
is always more
enough,
invested in Sally, and it's almost laughable because Bobby. There's like a Bobby episode like later on. It's like with him and Betty. It was like when they go on that field trip.
Yeah, he's the loser of that.
And then there's that.
I
I think it's a separate one where like he's on a summer camp.
That one's the season before, I think, because that's when like Don and Betty have that like affair again, real briefly, and that's the whole one where he's making him sing Father Abraham, and he's like looking at him with disgust, and then he feels like, I have to do it. So, great dad moment. Yeah. Love that.
But anyways, the show is always more invested in Sally's development. And Bobby's kind of an afterthought, and then as we said last time, Baby Eugene is even more of a.
That's not even. I would argue that's not even a character.
Yeah, I mean, not really. It's the ghost of Eugene.
Well, literally, it is in season 3 for Sally, especially. He's like leaving the. Because there's a lot of things to talk about in. Guy walks into an advertising agency, but one of them I think that's very important is that there's a ghost Barbie doll. That keeps and like she keeps freaking out about the Barbie doll, But anyway, obviously with this episode, kind of sets up the basic structure of a lot of early episodes of Mad Men. It will kind of do this less as it goes, because I actually was kind of interested in that when I was watching the final seasons, is when they would do actual pitches. It felt like, we're doing this again, because
this episode almost establishes like, there's like a pitch every episode. Right, it's like that's not the way.
And that's not
works.
how it is as it goes along, obviously. But it kind of made me miss that in the end, and I mean that's like its own version of this early version of itself. Like Justified was that way too, or some of these shows that start kind of as these almost like, for lack of a better term, cop shows or appearance shows. Where they have like, this is the case, or this is the thing that has to be done, and then once it's done, we'll move on to another one next time. This show kind of established itself with that. Like I said, like Justified did. The Americans kind of does that too in its own way. Mm-hmm. That's an easy thing for shows to do early on, is to build character through different situations, and then once that's over with, you can kind of move on and
tell stories on their own terms.
Right, which, a couple shows that didn't do that, notably, are Breaking Bad and Twin Peaks. Both did not ever do, and they were very much serial dramas from the beginning of themselves. But that's something we should also mention, maybe lastly, before we get into this episode, is that this show thrives on being a drama that is not serialized, in the sense of, like, it doesn't feel like we pick up right where we left off kind of thing. It's like, no, there could be like weeks or months go by between episodes, and we wouldn't really know. And it kind of hints at when it is. It's not real specific about this stuff. And I prefer that type of storytelling. I mean, The Sopranos was the same way.
But it didn't deal with the period element, so obviously
that is its own genius, is that it's able to clue us into dates based on events depicted or culture depicted, and sometimes it's specific about itself, about when it is. But I felt as a kid watching this, because I was relatively younger, or as a teenager, I should say. I felt like it wasn't treating me like an idiot, and I really appreciated that about it. That it was like, you're smart enough to figure out when this is, and that in a good way, that film of being dropped into this world, and you have to kind of figure out when it is, and it's that way the entire time, pretty consistently. It's very much that. And then
there's like expressly, this is Christmas, or like these big things that come,
or this is Memorial Day, or this is the moon landing, or like a big event day, or some, a date in history that's a big deal. Like, but obviously, I far prefer that personally to this is, and then it literally left off here, like, and there's great TV that does that. I'm not saying there isn't, but it's just that was my mode of TV that I grew to love, and that's pretty much the same.
Absolutely.
As it was. And The Wire is its own version of that too. It's not like directly, this literally just is. Sometimes it is, but that's kind of a have its cake and eat it too. It kind of does both. But Or is Don going to have his cake and eat it too in this episode?
That's the ultimate question. So we're going to take a brief station break. This episode is, of course, sponsored by who else? Lucky Strike cigarettes, which again is, as Levi said, the big main client of early on Sterling Cooper. And again, what's funny is like the first episode's all about, oh my God, smoking might be bad for you. What are we going to do about it? And that's, of course, what they're going to primarily be concerned with.
And of course,
Sterling
it is
Cooper.
toasted. It doesn't say so in this episode, but just remember, Lucky Strike, it's toasted.
Remember how great cigarettes used to taste.
Lucky still do. If your smoking pleasure has been somehow misplaced, it's Lucky's for you.
Yes, you get back to smoking when you smoke Lucky Strike, because you get back to fine tobacco. Lucky Strike tobacco, with a taste that's unforgettable and quality that never quits. LSMFT. Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. That's all there is to it.
Tobacco and taste too fine to filter. Taste you're sure to like. Tobacco and taste too fine to filter. Yours in every Lucky Strike.
Remember how great cigarettes used to taste.
Lucky still do.
And here we are. We're back again. I love that that ad that we just had in there. Very.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost makes you inevitably think, oh, was that something Don or Sterling Cooper would have come up with? Around this time period. So we were watching this off of Levi's Blu-rays.
One of those that says on it, it says high definition 1080p. That shows you how old it is.
This would have been made right around the time we were getting into
Actually,
watching
this is your
Blu-rays.
original Blu-rays for this that you kind of gave to me, and then when you got that big set. By the way, you want to talk real quick about that big set? It's nice, but like it's so hard to get the Blu-rays out of the set.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible.
Yeah, it's honestly annoying.
So we're using this.
Anyways, you might be streaming this, but we're watching this again using those Blu-rays. Hitting play in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We were talking about this opening credits a while ago.
Yeah, so obviously, very Saul Bass inspired, late 50s, early 60s. Feels like a Hitchcock movie. Great opening credit sequence. I think definitely among the best in TV's history.
The Sopranos, we said, was not. It was good, but like a little simple.
Yeah.
This one's a lot more.
And this also too led to all the like speculation about Don committing suicide as a.
Specifically, I remember Lost Horizon.
Yeah.
Was that episode? I remember it was a whole thing about him pushing against the glass, and it was like, oh my God, he's gonna jump.
Madman, a term coined in the late 1950s to describe the advertising executives of Madison Avenue. They coined it.
Do we believe they really did that? Well, we were saying it was like one guy might have maybe wrote that one time.
Yeah, I'm glad that here in the beginning of the show they like immediately tell us, hey, this is what this term means to move on from. And because this was my first understanding of the Madison Avenue as shorthand for the advertising agency. I've seen that done in a lot of older things, but I didn't know that at the time. You were saying too, one of the the first characters we see on screen are African Americans.
Yeah, well, and also like literally a moment ago, a character who's not even this guy, another waiter, was the first guy on screen. He was African American, so that's interesting.
This older, whiter actor here, I remember as being the elevator man in Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah.
Don, hardly exactly a progressive figure in a lot of ways, but it kind of has a general antipathy towards African Americans in the sense of like not really caring about the civil rights movement, but also not seeing black people exactly as lesser than. He's just those a lot of them color distinctions didn't really apply to him as much as it does some of the other characters in the show. Again, here we get the intro into
he's not from the South and he's not from a city, so it's like...
Right. We get his intro of his creative process of, especially in these first few seasons, a lot of his ideas come from conversations he has and things he hears from people. and he kind of has a contempt for market research, and it's like, oh, my research is talking to people and figuring out what they like.
Yeah, it's funny talking about, like, I love smoking, so I guess I could smoke another cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I guess you could, because they're all kind of the same, but speaking in news of smoking, I saw today that David Lynch is now unable to move and walk without oxygen, apparently.
I heard that too,
which is just very sad, but he's got emphysema. Now, that guy kind of looks like David Lynch.
Mm-hmm.
Very coiffed.
Yeah.
Very au natural, if you know what I mean. I hope you know what I mean, because I don't. Beatnik.
Yeah.
What about the Peaceniks?
Don's beatnik girlfriend.
Yeah.
There's a big part of season 1, and then she pops up again in season 4.
Yeah.
She kind of not exactly works in advertising, but is like, you know, works on greeting cards and cards, so it's kind of sort of in that realm. She's an artist.
Which is common back then. I mean, this was a time where even, like, just being a regular whatever artist, you could, like, get a job for some random thing.
Yeah.
You know. Like, in the business world. Can't really do that anymore. Well, people just don't do contract work anymore much. So.
Yeah.
This is the part where I say Don Draper is the greatest ad man ever, and his big, strong brain find a way to
We didn't talk much about John Hamm. Obviously, he had been in some smaller things here or there. I mean, he was effectively an unknown when this show debuted. Obviously, this made his stardom what it is now.
Yeah, now he's like a supporting actor in like big budget Hollywood movies. Really, that's only been even the case in that sense for the last so many years.
He's kind of went the opposite way that Steve Carell went, where Steve Carell's mostly known originally for comedy, and he's wants to do a lot of drama now, and Ham's kind of went the other way.
So weird, like,
where Ham wants to do a lot more comedy than drama.
Yeah.
I'm partially annoyed at both of those decisions, but that's their career, so let them do what they want, I guess. But I get the tendency to want to do something other than what people know you as, and also, like, you know, when you played Don Draper for 92, 93 episodes, would you want to do drama exactly all the time ever again?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd want to do something different, I get it, but
it's funny also that he's literally just saying he want to get married, and she almost doesn't even question that, like implying she don't even know he's married.
Yeah. And this establishes also, like, oh, he doesn't quite know what he's going to do. And then, like, obviously we see later with the It's Toasted that he kind of comes up with that almost in the moment based on everything that culminated before that. But
this is
exterior
what I call
here.
The swinging appendage music, because I'm not going to say that word on live air or off air.
David Carbonara, who does a lot of the score for this is, you know, some of this
Spaghetti Carbonara or whatever his name is.
Again, here we got Peggy, Harry,
Paul,
Paul.
Harry, Cole Phelps, whatever. I
can never remember his name.
Andrew Stanton is the actor's name.
Yeah.
I just
Ken
had
Cosgrove.
Ken Cosgrove. Why did I not think of it?
And honestly, The Office looks a little different in this first episode. It looks a little more gray.
Right. This Harry shush moment.
Get Pete Campbell introduced. one of the most despised characters
He
in
looks
the show.
he looks disgustingly young this
Yeah.
first season, like vomit-inducing young.
Judging from the creative brainpower around here, we'll probably end up seeing My Fair Lady. I'll tell you what. I'll drop by your place on my way.
The slipper room, is that what it's
Yeah, I think so. The Va-Va Voom room, the Jace.
Giving up my life to be with you.
Giving up my life.
Wow. We didn't hear what she said to that.
Yeah.
What a great gal.
Trudy probably wasn't very thrilled by that. Yeah, this moment, wow.
She stole my heart.
And her old man's loaded.
Well, also, he's rich, so who cares?
Yeah.
But whatever.
Executive floor. It should be working.
Yeah, her father, we'll get into him later.
yeah.
What a card.
Trudy.
Obviously, he's at the very beginning of
Yeah.
the episode, every episode now for us. But Joan Holloway, who I know was originally written as, was not intended to go past season 1.
Yeah.
Was mostly meant to be an introductory kind of figure for Peggy. But obviously, she was, Christina Hendricks was terrific, and they're like, hey, no, Joan should be
Yeah.
a recurring character. So,
I don't know what your goals are, but don't overdo it with
I mean, immediately her relationship with Peggy's established, and it's one that is antagonistic all throughout because I think there's a fantasy some people have. Oh, they get along and they should break away and be girl bosses together. But the reality is they have very different views of what a woman's place in this environment is.
Yeah. To speak a little bit about the advertising in general, advertising agencies, I find interesting is because you see how big the actual office is, and is that it's just like the people. There were whole agencies for that, just to you can't just hire a couple people per business
Company,
to do things
yeah.
like that. I don't know. It was just a different time where that was a thing. I don't know. I guess that still technically is in a smaller way, but most places do their own advertising now.
The men who designed these typewriters made it simple enough for a woman to use, they just said.
Thank you, Miss Holloway. You're really wonderful for looking.
Yeah, there are a few of those kind of very period-y moments, and Levi was alluding to earlier, and that was one of them, I feel like, oh, this new technology, and it's like showing a typewriter.
Well, and also,
Good morning, Mr. Draper.
at this time, later on in the show, they'll reference more about the fact that they are going in-house with advertising by that point.
Long night? Not this tobacco thing, is it? It's been on my mind. Yeah, well, I should hope so. Lee Garner, his father, the whole Lucky Strike family will be here.
And Roger Sterling is the guy who does nothing but owns the company.
If I was worried, I'd ask you what you got.
Obviously, his father and Cooper were the founding
partners, yeah.
partners, and he's just kind of not that he doesn't work. He does. He does stuff, but
He does, but as the show goes on, you realize that so much of his power is tied
to the name and
specifically the cigarette account, because Lee Gardner and that whole relationship. And so when that leaves kind of later on in the show, his own relevancy frankly fades. Although he is towards the end of the show helps engineer a few deals to make him feel more relevant, but on the whole his relevance over the period of the show is going to just continually decline.
yeah.
But one of the funniest characters, obviously, in the show,
Yeah.
John Slattery, also later directed some of the biggest episodes. So, again, what a treasure Roger Sterling is.
This is his moment to
This is-
brood.
yeah. A lot of brooding Don moments, so settle in for that.
This moment. So, what has he got? What is he getting?
Is he getting the gun? Oh, he's gonna pump some iron? Not quite yet.
Oh, he dropped his purple heart that isn't really hit. Well, he was wounded, but he's alive.
Establishes he's obviously
Lieutenant.
Korean War veteran.
Yeah.
That's an underlying tension a little bit on, especially season 1, is that Roger was a World War II veteran, Don's a Korean War veteran. Some of these younger guys didn't serve at all just because they're too young to have. Sal Romano, introduced art director here at Sterling Cooper.
He always looks very relaxed. Of course, he doesn't smoke. Pen or pencil.
you're better off with a little sex appeal. Give me a woman in a bathing suit, put her next to your guy. Sexy girl? I can do that. Give a chance to get a real model. I love my work.
So Sal's closetedly gay, you know, that's obviously hinted at. Just now, even, you know, he's like, oh, like, I got this guy to pose for this as a model, but obviously he probably also had a relationship with the man, but he's in seasons 1 through 3. He disappears after that, as we'll see.
And is never brought up again.
Yeah.
Interesting. Not even in passing. Like.
Yeah.
This is the German woman that's the doctor, Our man in research, he said. Wow.
She's like trying to bring in Freudian psychology.
Well, I guess 2 parts of the Axis powers are represented here. Was it? No Japanese folks. Like.
The medical thing is dead. Which literally, that happened later on. With, you know, that's alluding to that.
About warnings, you talking about? Yeah.
I love that line.
Yeah.
And earlier, it was like he was showing a cigarette, and he's like, I do my own research. Like, again, having this contempt for all this psychological, research-minded appeals to why we should do things a certain way. He obviously, and we'll see this over the course of the show, he thinks of advertising as his own personal art form, that he doesn't want academics to come in and try to moralize to him. In large part why he would never go to a therapist. Like he's saying here, like, we're not going to make people think they have a death wish. That's ridiculous, you know.
Bambi and cigarettes.
Has anyone else seen this? Of course not. It's your account. Good. I want to hear about it anymore.
Oh, cool.
Classic, like...
I find your whole approach perverse.
Mid-century man approach. Throw something away. I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Mm-hmm. But I find your whole approach perverse. Like, what? Like...
The whole idea of drinking in the office, obviously, today seems so crazy to most people.
Well, I had a college professor who actually worked in an ad agency in the later 70s in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And he even mentioned, he was like, yep, it was just like Mad Men, drinking all day, smoking, not really doing anything. He said it was literally exactly like that. So,
wow, working in advertising in the late 70s in New Orleans, that had to be a whole scene.
He was in Vietnam before that. Like I said, it's very like, okay.
He's seen some things.
That was a good slight light change.
Yeah.
That show does that a lot, where it'll like just to show passage of time, just change the lights.
No, sir.
That's good. He doesn't know I'm sleeping in here, does he?
I'm Peggy Olson, the new girl.
That's like when I call a student up to the desk and another student has to wake him up, and they're like, he doesn't know I'm sleeping over here, does he? Like, yes, he does. That's good. Like,
The first day, I don't want to seem uncooperative, but do I have to?
I see your point.
I brought you some aspirin.
It seems so strange to see, again, Peggy as a secretary, because she doesn't stay that very long.
You look like $100. Ready to go sweet talk some retail Jews?
You worked out today first thing in the morning, Pete.
Some retail Jews.
Speaking of which, who's your little friend here?
Oh, she's the new girl.
You always get the new girl. Management gets all the perks.
management gets all the perks? Question mark.
Secretarial school.
Top notch. But I meant, where you from? Are you Amish or something?
Amish, Jewish, a-hole. Like, we got everybody, you know.
Well, you're wasting a little bit. You might look like a woman.
Is that all, Mr. Draper?
Hey, I'm not done here. I'm working my way up.
It's just some of the most blatant sexism,
Yeah.
honestly, in the whole show.
Oh, it's time for your 11 o'clock meeting.
Oh, and sorry about Mr. Campbell here. He left his manners back at the fraternity house.
And so
She's a little young for you, Draper.
we'll talk about this over the course of the show. Don has a very almost chivalrous idea of women, where he's clearly someone who doesn't see a woman on the level of himself.
No, he's
but
a
he's
womanizer,
not.
but
He has a certain sense of chivalry that obviously is he does not treat or talk to women in the same way that Pete does here. But
Are you already sleeping with her? Advertising is a very small world. When you do something
so Pete is so desperate for him to like him early on here, and
make it even smaller.
The steno pool.
yeah.
And even if you do get my job, you'll never run this place. You'll die in that corner office, mid-level executive with a little bit of hair, women go home without a penny. Wanna know why? 'Cause no one will like you.
It's notable. This is literally the first interaction between Don and Pete in this show, and it's just like, you suck. Sit down, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, listen to me.
You know Pete Campbell, of course, your account executive if you choose to do business with us, and this handsome fellow is Don Draper, the best creative director in New York.
Well, at least the building. Pleasure to meet you.
Ooh, sorry about that.
I'm Rachel Mencken.
Very clearly, like, doesn't even, again, expected to be talking to a man.
You are.
And this guy here is literally,
Don, you remember David Cohen?
oh, David Cohen, our fellow, the Jew we have working here. Like,
Well, why don't we make ourselves comfortable in this Mencken?
Basically, yeah, he's the one Jew they could find. Like,
Under your shirt. I had to go all the way to the mailroom, but I found one.
so he was even in the mailroom.
Yeah.
Like, not even art. Like,
so again, there's these exteriors, some of which were shot in New York, but this show
Yeah.
was obviously shot in California, LA.
so I just found out a really big piece of news that I wasn't aware of is that this doctor is the son of Renee Abenjois.
Oh my God, I didn't
And
know
that's
that, but I
literally-
actually
yeah.
see.
And he's
see
also
that.
Hardeen on Boardwalk Empire. You remember, like, the brother of Houdini or whatever?
Yeah.
I just looked that up a while ago, and I was like, wait.
I now
what?
totally
Like,
see Renee Abenjois
Yeah.
in his face, but I didn't know that. Okay. I think there'd be a natural comedy to somebody watching this in 2007 or now of seeing a doctor smoke a cigarette in a doctor's office.
And then, like, putting in a birth control device while smoking a
1960
cigarette.
was the year of the pill, I know,
Yeah.
as far as contraception, birth control being new.
You're interested in the contraceptive pills.
March. They were getting to it early.
Mm-hmm.
Nervous? John sent you to me because I'm not here to judge you. There's nothing wrong with a woman being practical about the possibility of sexual activity.
Looks fun.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
The putting on the gloves, not the this whole thing.
Strumpet. Slide your fanny toward me. I'm not going to bite.
It's stuff like this that make you go, oh gosh,
Yeah,
poor women.
yeah, I
all
know.
the crap they got to go through.
I'll warn you now. I will take you off this medicine if you abuse it. It's for your own good, really. But the fact is, even in our modern times,
This is
March
very, very clearly
1960.
March 1960, yeah.
What would be funny is if it was like a Last of Us moment of like September 2014. That's like what the dates always say on the calendars because that's when the world ended. But and then she looks and he's one of the infected. Enovid. Paxlovid.
$10 a month. Don't think you have to go out and become a town pump just to get your money's worth. Excuse my French.
The town pump. If you know what I mean. Lick my love pump era. The Danny Thomas Show.
That's the
Sorry,
first
we
I've
had
ever heard of
we
this.
had a Twilight Zone moment.
Yeah, so on the Twilight Zone Blu-rays, sometimes mostly they have ads for the Danny Thomas Show coming up after that, or sometimes oh God, what the Steve McQueen Western
Wanted Dead or Alive.
Yeah, Wanted Dead or Alive sometimes.
So that's probably going to be your Patchy Award, right? As a Danny Thomas.
I mean,
I'm just saying. I just want to put that out there so you don't forget. But yeah, I love. By the way, that one guy just has to sit here the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, imagine how insulting that is to Rachel too, though. Just like,
here's a Jew.
Like, I mean, it's so clear to her that like he's no man of import at this company. He's just he's a Jew like you, like for Jews like you. Thank you.
Of course, Rosemary DeWitt was in, or was most notably on Billions.
She's been in movies here or there, small parts, but yeah.
I want your kind of people, Mr. Draper. People who don't care about coupons, whether or not they can afford it. People who are coming to the store because it is expensive.
No, she's married to Ron Livingston.
Very different ideas.
Yeah,
Did you know that?
the customer is always...
I think I did know that. Yeah, I'd forgotten it.
I really thought you could do better than this. Sterling Cooper has a reputation for being innovative.
Miss, you are way out of line, please.
Well, again, this goes to what I was saying earlier. He's like, clearly has. This is one of his most male chauvinist moments.
Right.
Is just, I'm not going to have a woman correct or talk to me this way.
Chanel is a very different kind of place.
That's all I wear. Like, wait, what? Like,
the secret Pete Campbell life.
You're right, Roger. This place really runs on charm.
This is ridiculous.
Talk to me like this. This meeting is over. Good luck, Miss Megan.
Anyway.
Again, we like to downplay Pete. Oh, Pete's an idiot, this and that. But, like, there's a lot of instances where Pete smooths things over with certain people. Like, you know, now he's acting like he's on his side. But
Well, Roger's not going to be happy, so I guess that's good for you.
I'm not going to pretend I don't want your job, but you were right. I'm not great with
well, he tries to have his job later when he does. You gonna die with anybody? You gonna die? Might as well die with us.
Yeah.
plenty of room at the top.
Look, I'm sorry I was so hard on you before. It's just this damn tobacco thing.
You'll think of something. A man like you, I'd follow into combat blindfold,
All right, buddy.
and I wouldn't be the first. Am I right, buddy?
They're reminiscent of later. I won't let you down, Don. It's like, Jesus, Campbell, don't ever say that. Oh, gonna drop the F-bomb here. Again,
and then the censors were like, "Ah!"
I know there's a good little interview with Matthew Weiner being asked how this show would be different if it was on HBO, because I think originally HBO had a shot to do it, but they passed on it. And he said that ultimately he's glad it didn't happen. It kind of like, you know, naturally the language barriers.
It made it more about what it was about.
Yeah, honestly,
almost.
and you said because there's a certain expectation of what an HBO show is, and obviously there's been a lot of great HBO shows, but that this wasn't exactly that. Flo, of course, from Progressive ads there, and Kristen Shaw, the comedian, I think that's her name, in the middle.
Unfortunately, and not so unfortunately, this type of job would very quickly over the decade not exist just by nature of technology. But
yeah.
She has to lose 8 pounds by the Christmas party. I think you look great. And it's because I'm sitting down. You can come back and
I mean, it's a version of it happens now, but it's weird to think about. Literally, like, there was a time where you were literally coming through this phone wire. Let me connect you to this person, and literally, it was like, I mean, literally more analog and more mechanical than
real Eddie Izzard and Valkyrie overseeing the phone lines at the Wolf's Den, like, you know, moment.
I forgot that he was in that.
I just don't know what we have to do.
This is our North Carolinian representation here.
How do you feel?
Not as bad as it could be, I guess. Lee Garner Jr. as a whole.
Yeah. He doesn't represent.
Well, also, we're just being honest. These are Eastern North Carolina people. They're not Western North Carolina people.
That's a relatively good enough North Carolina accent.
Yeah,
closer than it could be.
Yeah. I don't think this show presents him exactly as like total idiot yokels either. Like,
No.
They're annoying, but that's more like just because they're a big client, not because of that.
Our product is fine. I smoke them myself.
I love this here.
He died at 95 years old. Hit by a truck.
So I had nothing to do with smoking, by the way.
What the hell are we gonna do?
He's probably smoking in the grave. Like,
Tobacco research center to put this whole rumor to rest.
And that's a very good start. But it may not affect sales.
Don and Pete both looking over at Don like, all right. Or Roger and Pete, excuse me, looking over at Don like, oh, well, what's it going to be?
well, I've been working very hard and thinking quite a bit.
When you ask a kid to give a book report, like
when you ask them to
read a paragraph,
when you ask them to say their name these days.
I mean, you know, I'm a Lucky Strike man. Way back.
It's so bad.
It's like, what's your name again, please, sir? Like, you imagine like if Pete had not stepped in?
What the
happen?
hell?
Like,
Yeah. He's like, wait, what? Somebody's actually doing their job today?
People get in their cars every day to go to work.
He's like, you see that look? Like, you're disgusting. Like,
There's nothing you can do about it.
But then he swings in a chandelier and does not crap on it here in a little bit.
Cigarettes are exactly
this is another way to show you that Don can work on his feet. Apparently, he couldn't 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
You're a man.
You're a man.
The world is dangerous. Smoke your cigarette. You still have to get where you're going.
It's actually not terrible, but
Yeah.
I mean, if cigarettes were dangerous, it would be.
If they are. That's your slogan. You're gonna die anyway. Die with us.
Actually, it's a fairly well-established psychological principle.
You can tell he read the research.
yeah.
Death wish.
He's like, oh, crap. Yeah.
The market potential is
What the hell are you talking about? Are you insane? I'm not selling rifles here. I'm in the tobacco business.
Tobacco
We're
business.
selling America. The Indians gave it to us for shit's sake.
Come on, Dad.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here.
Yeah, the whole Jamestown deal.
At least we know if we have this problem, everybody.
Well, I guess everybody's gonna die. My grandpa died, like.
The same music as before when he was having a war flashback.
Yeah.
He's like, now I'm in my own war. Like,
Yeah.
Gentlemen, before you leave, can I just say something? I don't know, Don. Can you?
he's an a-hole but fair. Like,
And Reader's Digest will do you a favor. It lets you know that any ad that brings up the concept of cigarettes and health together, well, it's just going to make people think of cancer.
Yes, and we're grateful to.
What Lee Jr. said is right.
We didn't really talk about it earlier, but Reader's Digest is still read, but there was a time where it was like the most widely read publication in the country. I know a lot of things Reagan talked about in the 70s and 80s come from Reader's Digest because that was kind of on the pulse of the American public in a big way.
6 identical companies making 6 identical products. We can say anything we want. How do you make your cigarettes?
I think I've read before that this whole It's Toasted thing was something that Lucky Strike did, I think, in the late 20s or early 30s was a real slogan that
I didn't
they
know
had
it was that
used.
far back.
Yeah.
There you go. But everybody else's tobacco is toasted. No, everybody else's tobacco is poisonous. Lucky Strikes.
Oh, so you can have it with eggs and bacon, and it's just
this moment.
I don't think I have to tell you what you just witnessed here. I think you do.
Explain, please. Like,
Advertising is based on one thing.
not knowing what you're going to say when you come into a meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like- I guess ignorance is bliss.
It's freedom from fear.
Cut to
freedom from fear. What the hell is this? The 4 freedoms of FDR? Like
freedom from want.
Yeah.
Like, that was a classic, like, cut to the... And we'll have a call back to that moment in, like, season 7.
Yeah.
But that was like a classic cut to the client taking it in moment.
Yeah. He's toasted. Now, sometimes, like, and this is true of a lot of the pitches, where it's not going to get into the particulars of how we're going to sell this. It's just like, this is the slogan. This is the look of what a campaign's going to be, but it doesn't really go past that.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
For the record, pull it out of thin air. Thank you up there. You're looking in the wrong direction.
One of Don's few allusions to God.
Wake up every morning along with Jesus.
Modesty, that's adorable. Consider the product. It's young, handsome.
Oh, it's like this is their celebratory drink.
Too difficult to
Yeah.
convince America Dick Nixon is a winner.
So obviously, Sterling Cooper is going to be consulted with the Dick Nixon campaign of the '60 election. So that's a thing that comes up here or there.
Thank you, boys.
And a lot of the characters ostensibly identify as this era of rich Republican or well-to-do
Yeah.
Republican white collar.
Anyway, you can be as charming as I said you were. Haven't you had enough of my magic for one day?
Don't you just love that the younger ones are coming in like, well, we didn't have really anything to do with that meeting, but let's load up like.
Just a minute. Fellas, I think this party's going to have to move elsewhere.
Me at the end of every
That's me during like my planning periods half the time, or like kids that like, especially seniors who come in that don't have a fourth period and they want to hang out, and I'm like, all right, let's get out of here.
Yeah, that's what happens when it's time for my planning period and they're supposed to be going to their elective classes and they all come out and come in and want to hang out. I'm like, gentlemen, I think it's time to take this party elsewhere. And it's like all ladies like.
If Greta's research was any good, I would have used it.
What are you talking about?
I'm saying I had a report just like that. It's not like there's some magic machine that makes identical copies of things.
Oh, that's I forgot about that.
he
That's so
stole
he
that.
went through his trash. Big L.
Have a great night, Pete. Congratulations.
What are you, the daggum janitor in election? Like,
Yeah, a-hole.
I mean, to be fair,
It
Matthew
was a
Broderick,
lie.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, but come on, play the game. Like,
that is one of the most. I mean, we talked about it on the
Yeah.
pod when we did it back for Overland Dollar. One of the most well cut scenes in
Yeah.
any movie I can think of at the end when it's like showing all the people.
And he's
and
like,
he's like, oh yeah, I did it.
yeah,
Again, here's Peggy making a move,
making a football move,
not in the boardroom, but closer to the bedroom.
making a football move
Yeah.
though. He's the football player, as I must remember. I bet he never even held a football.
Boss, not your boyfriend. Second of all, you ever let Pete Campbell go through my trash again and you won't be able to find a job selling sandwiches.
Someone like him that would have been his age, he probably, like they would have had the corn cob club. He would have probably been a part of like his school.
The corn cob
Just like the most
club.
random
Yeah.
backwoods country thing like this. I love too that like he rejects her here, but he's not like belittling her exactly.
Right.
He's just like, no, thank you.
I need you to place a call.
And obviously she's embarrassed,
Yeah.
but he's not. He doesn't really hold it against her.
He
He's-
probably forgot about it in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
This is the corn cob club right here.
That-
Somebody's got a
should-
corn cob
that'd be
pipe
like
and
a
button nose.
backwoods strip club or something.
The corn cob club.
Yeah. Triple C.
Yeah.
I want to see you here every 15 minutes, whether you have drinks or not. Every 5 minutes. Let's live here.
King Cosgrove goes through a lot of changes. He's like one of the boys at this stage, but that kind of,
Yeah.
he's a character that kind of drops off a very little bit in the middle of the show, but then he comes back when he comes back to Sterling Cooper Draper
Yeah.
Price.
I hope we're not interrupting anything.
Definitely not.
Well, I have the best. What are we drinking?
More whatever's making you the way you are.
I love this place. It's hot, loud.
This moment.
I know what you mean.
I mean,
When
that's
she's looking
that
like-
definitely is basically already at this
Yeah.
stage an official confirmation that he's gay.
this all the time.
I like to laugh.
Is that right?
I love to lick kind of attitude.
I mean it. It's too.
Too delicious.
Hey, I said stop it. What do you think you're doing?
You know exactly.
You know what, girls? I think we should go.
Oh, come on.
Really?
Gotta say, Pete really putting together the case for
Yeah.
that L for this episode.
I think we've all.
Gotta
I
say.
think we already know. This is going to be as certain of a C-Corps laxative award like when you're out with your parents and they're like, "We'll get you this for Christmas, but forget about it." Like, but you
Yeah.
already know. Like,
Yeah. He's like, wow, what is my life at this stage?
it is funny, like, to go from that to this and be real, like, this is what real adults do.
Yeah.
It's like,
A lady, a special nighttime, and one whiskey.
neat. Ain't that neat?
So, you're going to ply me with drinks and convince me what a terrible mistake I'm making.
That's quite a drink.
You got in trouble.
Joey's like, that's one of them fancy drink. We didn't have those at the Corn Cob Club. Like,
Yeah.
Certainly shouldn't have treated you like anything less than a client.
Apology accepted.
So you understand.
So you understand.
Yeah.
It's a real, like, what?
also, you as a woman, you've come to the error of your ways, correct? It's like,
Yeah.
the way he's looking at it.
Well, I'm not really as bad as all that. It's under a lot of pressure. Doesn't count. Doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't.
It's an interesting club we got going on here.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a exotica tiki bar, but like a more of a sit down club with like zebra print walls. Like,
Yeah.
what do we got going on here?
Family would make you happier than all the headaches that go along with fighting people like me.
There's going to be a lot of different reasons why Don pursues some of the women that he does. I think with Rachel Menken's case, it's like it's part of the chase because it's
Yeah.
like a lot of the women he's with are not necessarily as intellectually minded or as successful on their own terms as she is, and so that's why he's like, this is a different kind of woman for me. Like,
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of a counterpoint to, oh gosh, what's her name earlier in the episode? His artist girlfriend. She's
Midge. Yeah.
Midge. Obviously, she's like successful on her terms, but she's more of a bohemian type versus Rachel here is more of a again established business person.
Yeah.
And then again, Betty, who we don't see till the very, very end of this one, and mostly in the next episode, is counterpoint to that. That's a great line too, as far as like, oh, like me and my group of people invented the idea of love just to sell
Yeah.
products, and
Die alone, and this world just drops a bunch of rules on top of you to make you forget those facts, but I never forget.
I never.
this is one of the most memorable season
Yeah.
1 Don scenes because he kind of spells out his
And there was
the
literally
Don
was in
Draper-
all of the ads on
Yeah.
AMC all the time.
the Don Draper worldview.
But it must be hard being a man, too.
Excuse me.
Mr. Draper? Mr. Draper. I don't know
No.
what it is you really believe in, but I do know
Who do you believe in? Like, what do you believe in?
see the whole world laid out in front of you the way other people live it.
He's like, man, a woman can talk to me this way. Like,
Tells me you know it, too.
So that's her way of saying that. Basically, that sounds like a bunch of BS to me. That
Yeah.
the Don like hiding something face,
Right.
like no, it's not true. Like a little like head shake, like
I'm gonna have a heart attack.
yeah.
Like season 4 moment. But
office Monday morning for a real meeting.
So he got himself a second date, so to speak, with her agency.
But also
their agency having another shot at
a third date, if you will.
Yeah.
Because that first date, bad dates moment.
We're not buying anything.
Actually, for the first time today, I'm not selling anything. Does Peggy live here?
Well, you're selling something, all right.
Selling a load of BS.
I don't think he's sober.
Nah, I doubt it.
In fact, I hope not. Just kidding.
It's okay, Marjorie. We work together.
Do you know this scumbag? There's also, how many
Wait a
Peggy
second.
roommates are there?
Is that the woman that plays the neighbor that's that guy, the neighbor that's friends with Betty? It looks a lot like her.
I don't know. I don't think so, but it does.
Yeah,
it
I just kind of was
like
looking
her,
like,
yeah.
wait, what? What's her husband's name? Carlton,
yeah. Who made it into the intro of the episode, I should say.
But won't be making it into that great advertising agency in the sky. That's all I know. Well, you've seen, so good night. In the words of Mickey and Seinfeld, good night.
Imagine being so desperate that you have to go to the secretary of a guy that you work with after her first day because you're so rejected that you insulted earlier that day, that you're so desperate that you're like, oh yeah, I want to go see if I can have a chance with her. Just wow.
Down with the sickness.
Yeah. That's what Pete's all about.
Meanwhile, swinging appendage,
yeah,
music. This is what I feel like driving home 5 minutes from work.
Ossining.
Yep.
Which is where Don lives. What would you think about that whole life of having to get on a train to
That's most
go
people's
all the
lives
way
is
to go
versions of
somewhere
that. Big commutes. Yeah. I wouldn't like it.
I have a 30-minute commute by car, and that's not that bad. I actually like the commute, but you just get used to it.
Yeah. Mine's a quick one, 5 minutes.
So we get Don again arriving back at his home.
Yeah, because it's kind of weird because it kind of implies earlier, what, does he just stay with Midge all the time? Or what's the deal?
Our formal introduction to Betty Draper. Played by January Jones. I think one of the saddest and most complicated characters of the whole show.
She's one of my favorite ones, and in a way that also isn't positive because I love to hate her in her own way too sometimes. Not all the time, but
that's what's great about Betty is that we've all known Bettys in our lives that are, and the dimensions of her misery are both outside of herself and in some cases self-inflicted, and that's what makes her compelling as a character.
Betty, old Bettrit.
How you doing, Betrick?
How you doing, Betrick? Bettrit. Sock-feeted Don.
I wonder how many people who watch this for the first time...
Sock-footed
watch this for the first time would be like, oh, of course he has a family and cheats, and would just shrug and go, that's just what happened back then, that's the way it was. Kiernan Shipka.
And still even Kiernan Shipka all the way back, far back.
Who was just in Twisters this year.
I love he was looking like he was in trouble,
Yeah.
I really like this as an ending because then it totally says, oh, actually, but there's another whole part to this man's life that's like a totally different thing.
Right.
And I think is interesting.
Yeah, because
especially after you hear what he said to her. Which
Yeah.
is like, oh, you're born alone, you die alone, who cares? And it's like, you literally have a family that's like... but...
Yeah, as you said, the whole episode naturally establishes him as, he's this brilliant working guy who's got all these ideas about this and that, and then he's got this cynical worldview, and then, by the way, he's got a family too, though. So that's the first episode of Mad Men. We'll see where it goes from here,
Let's do what we've been wanting to do the whole time, which is...
speed it up.
All right, yep, that's the first episode. Any new thoughts on that at all, or before we do our awards?
No, I feel like I've seen this quite a bit because similar to, I've watched the whole show a few times, but similar to you, like there's been a few false starts I've had, so I feel like I know this episode particularly pretty well. So yeah.
All right, so first things first, we have before we get to talking about what's coming up, we have our awards, and of course, just as a reminder, there are 4 awards per episode, and there will be 3 for the entire season, but we'll do that at the end. Our first award is the Lucky Strike Championship.
It's toasted.
For who won the episode.
I gotta go with Don Draper on this one because just the introduction of this character, and again the dimensions of this worldview in terms of that scene with him and Rachel where he's kind of spelling out what he thinks and how it's very slick and cool, but then even she as an outsider sees through that's probably not exactly who you are, and then how the episode ends. I just think, to me it just seems inevitable. It's like that, and I'll be curious to see how many Don wins of this because I'm like, obviously he's the main character. A lot of the show is going to be based around him. But I just feel like the introduction of him in this episode is incredibly important and also very strong, so I'm going to go with Don Draper.
Yeah. I normally would say the same thing. I said Rosemary DeWitt earlier, by the way. I meant to say
Rachel Menken.
Rachel Menken's character. Where is she at here? That's weird.
If you go to IMDb, they probably got
her name should have been pretty high up there. No, I don't want AMC. Hang on. That part of me wants to say Rachel Menken on this because Maggie Siff. That's right.
Maggie Siff, yeah.
Okay.
But
I think I got to go Dawn on this one.
She is very, and she's going to actually probably win a future episode on here. I think wouldn't you agree we're going to try hard not to give Don the award for this every episode because there's obviously as the lead of the show he's going to be important,
and my reason is pretty much the same as what you said. I think the biggest thing other than everything is that he literally does think of all that out of thin air all of a sudden. It seems like to just do the "it's toasted" thing, and that's just.
And again, just in general, the introduction of this character in the pop culture lexicon is in of itself incredibly important, undeniably important.
So Don Draper, you have officially won for both of us the Lucky Strike Championship.
Alrighty.
Every commercial block on air in the land of Lincoln is clogged up with laxative buys.
All right, so the Secor Laxative Award, remember, is for who lost.
So it's got to be Pete Campbell for me. And again, Pete's not gonna win or quote lose, however you want to say it, this award every episode because he's gonna have some really strong ones in the future. But I think this episode is very much intentionally setting him up to be the total scumbag, dirtbag. And again, he is going to function effectively as the villain of season 1. That's not always going to be true of the show. But also, he is a counterpoint to... He's mostly, put in opposition to Don in this. As the show goes on, he's honestly more put in opposition to Roger because they're more of the same literal, accounts position. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's going to be counterpointed towards... Roger more so than Don as the show goes on, but in this first episode and season, it's a lot of him versus Don. And I think, too, Vincent Kartheiser is really terrific as Pete Campbell, and so I got to go with Pete on this one.
Yeah. I agree. You can't have an episode like this and not lose. From the attempts at, sweet talking Don and doing what he wants, kind of, whatever, to stealing out of his trash can, to basically filling up a woman, to drunkenly impregnating Peggy. Like, you just sucking the big one here. Like, wow. Bad look, bro. And I mean, we're also going to try not to give it to him every episode.
That's what I said earlier. Like, he's not going to.
Just the same with Don. Yeah, because Don will lose some episodes here and there. So.
For sure.
So, Pete Campbell, you officially won, for both of us, the Secor Laxative Award.
So, clean sweep so far.
Yeah, it's definitely a clean sweep for that Secor Laxative at this point.
I'm sorry. Am I bothering you?
What's going on?
I just got off the phone with my brother. It's the strangest thing. Apparently my father was on that plane.
What?
And we should note also, by the way, before we do our last two, that this will count as 2 for each person.
Right.
So, just so we know. So, you've already racked up 2, Pete.
And Don's
racked
won
up 2,
2.
Don.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're doing 270 to win here, but we're not going to talk about that. All right. Mohawk Airlines plaque for the most shocking scene, line of dialogue, or event in any given episode. This and the Apache Palm are going to be a little tough for this one because there's not as much stuff, I feel like, in this
I've got
episode.
an answer. I don't know if you do.
You go ahead first.
I remember when I first saw this show, like, the moment that kind of most shocked me was when Roger says, do we have any Jews in this office? And Don's like, not on my watch, and Don's kind of meaning it mostly facetiously, but, like, the whole, like, and maybe it was just the age I watched this at, but just like the anti-Semitism that was present in the episode, I think is actually very much so reflective of the prevailing WASP culture of the time. But like that moment and this overall, like, where these, the worldview of these characters being defined in such a way was something that to me was shocking, especially when I first saw it. But
I think that's a good one to pick. But for me, it's actually going to be Pete Campbell using the F-bomb.
Yeah.
Because that's not really
something that's going to be in the show very much either.
No, and it's interesting the people that the show chooses to let use it.
Because there's a few instances as it goes along. Yeah, that's a good choice.
So a little bit different here, but Mohawk Airlines plaque for Kyle goes to the anti-Semitism of Jews, not on my watch, and for me, Levi goes to Pete Campbell using the F-bomb.
Okay.
This is Patchy.
All right, the Patchy Palm. Best cultural references. I already forecasted yours. I don't know if it changed. There's not as much in this one either. Mine's actually not that. It's something different.
Why don't you go first on this?
Mine's actually going to be Gidget, which I have not seen yet, and this also reminds me that I need to see it. The moment where he's like working out with the little thing, and he's like, all right, Gidget, or whatever. Gidget's, one of those, like, surf movies Cliff Robertson was in.
Yeah.
Randomly. I was just looking it up, but I've always wanted to see, also Sandra Dee was the leading that, James Darren. Paul Wendico's film. But yeah, I just thought that was random. Plus, it doesn't really fit what we're talking about. Unless there's something there.
I gotta admit, I'm drawing a blank. What did you think?
The Danny Thomas thing.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The Danny Thomas show. So that's what you're going with. Okay.
Yeah. Just because, that would have been my introduction to this. So, the Danny Thomas show. Again, I feel bad for this one not having one immediately.
Yeah, well, as it goes on, it'll be different.
Yeah, I know, but yeah. So, again, I'm glad we got through this one. Again, not that it's bad, but it's just as we go along, as we've said, the show's going to further develop itself.
So just to be clear, the Patchy Palm for Kyle goes to the Danny Thomas show, i.e., Twilight Zone. Ad at the end.
Yeah.
Mine goes to Gidget, the 1959 film, which they would have been referencing.
Yeah. Very good.
All right, so I guess to wrap up, I guess we can talk about the next episode, which is the ladies' room. This is going to be an episode where it's actually a lot more about Betty and her living at home. And yeah, I guess it's the whole thing about her like crashing the car or whatever.
I'll just read what it said, and I'll read this next time again
Right.
too. But Ladies' Room episode 2 in this episode, guy says, Don continues to conceal his increasingly complicated personal life, even in the face of Roger, John Slattery's invitation to open up. Meanwhile, Peggy, Elizabeth Moss, pines for the absent Pete, still on his honeymoon. He's not going to be in the next episode, while fending off the advances of several of the men of Sterling Cooper. So, he didn't really mention that about Betty. But nonetheless, that's going to do it for our first/second episode of Blowing Smoke, the officially unofficial Mad Men
overlapping
podcast.
dialogue.
I know, deep down I was about to
that's
say
what
that,
I was thinking
so
too.
we're going to have to get used
so
to it.
just to be clear, Don Draper, 2 Lucky Strike votes, 0 Secor Laxative Awards. Pete Campbell, 0 Lucky Strike championships. 2 Secor Laxative Awards. It's not looking good, baby. But just remember what our predictions were. Kyle predicted Roger Sterling to win the most Lucky Strike championships. I predicted Peggy Olson. You predicted Harry Crane to get the most Secor Laxative Awards. I predicted Ted Shaw. Already not looking good for both of those, as far as my picks anyway.
Mine aren't. I think Peggy on your part's a good guess.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good one. As far as Ted Shaw, I was trying to be too random with that.
I wonder with Harry Crane, like, he's not going to be the focal point of as many episodes.
He's
exactly
definitely losing that one where he has all the White Castles that he eats, though.
No question. Yeah, but
unless it's like something big happens that episode we forgot about, that's like, oh, this person really screwed something up or something, But anyway,
this is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless, and we'll see you next time.
They sure work hard, don't they, Barney?
Yeah? I hate to see them work so hard.
Yeah, me too. Let's go around back where we can't see them.
Gee, we ought to do something, Fred.
Okay? How's about taking a nap?
I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break.
That's it! Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack. Winston's got that filter blend.
Yeah, Fred. Filter blend makes the big taste difference, and only Winston has it up front where it counts. Here, ahead of the pure white filter. Winston packs rich tobaccos specially selected and specially processed for good flavor in filter smoking.
Yeah, Barney, Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
The Flintstones has been brought to you by Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette.
Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
And that concludes our broadcast day.
You best be sleeping.